Good morning, Year 6, and welcome to our English lesson today. And today we start our new story, Leon and the Place Between, and this is our Fantasy Stories unit, which we'll be focusing on the next few weeks. And our model text for this unit will be this book, which I talked about during Monday's catch-up, Leon and the Place Between. Don't worry if you've not got a copy of the book. We'll be able to share it online and you'll be able to see the images too. So today's learning objective is to write a fantasy story for our cold task to find out what you know already about fantasy stories. But don't worry, before I set you off on the task, I'm going to help you with some of my slides. So first of all, when we say that phrase, fantasy stories, what comes to mind? And maybe those children in school, you can have a discussion on your tables, and children at home, hopefully you can have a discussion with somebody in your house about what fantasy stories have you read? Maybe what have you got on your bookshelf at home? Do you like them? How would you describe the setting, and how is it different from maybe just a normal adventure story? What about the characters in there? And are the characters in a fantasy story very different to other kind of genres? What about the description? Often in a book without pictures, the reader relies a lot on really well describe settings and characters so we can build that image. And is that even more important with fantasy stories? Before we start writing, we always need to think about the PAT. And do you remember this mnemonic we use at school, linked to our IPEAL work? So P is for purpose. What is the purpose for writing a fantasy story? It's to entertain, isn't it? The A, can you remember what A is for? A is for audience. And our audience might be children, it might be really young children who just rely on pictures to tell the story. Or it might be children your age or older, or adults, or both. So it really depends who we're aiming our story to be at. And T, type, text type. What is our text type of a fantasy story? And it's fiction, isn't it? And the narrative genre. So it's really important to hold those things in our mind when we're writing. When I said that fantasy stories phrase a few slides ago, some of these might have come to mind. You might have read, hopefully heard of them, and maybe read some of them. The Lord of the Rings, you might have seen the film or started to read them. Harry Potter, really popular, and the way J.K. Rowling uses her fantasy setting and the characters to bring those events to life. You might have read books about dragons, books about fantasy settings like that castle in a fantasy world. And then that image with a book like left open and something coming to life, like with fairies in Another Life. And if someone said to you, what's the definition then of a fantasy story? A fantasy is a genre of speculative fiction set in a fictional universe, often inspired by real-world myth and folklore. Its roots are in oral traditions, which then became fantasy literature and drama. So if we think of fantasy stories of being in a world that's completely made up, it's quite exciting because we can make it into what we want it to be. Okay, so your objective today, you're going to have a go at writing one and show us what you already know. Now I want you to think about, what will your setting be like? How are you going to make up this make-believe universe? Is it going to be a bit like Harry Potter in that some bits are completely believable where others are very different? What are your characters are going to be like, and how are you going to portray them? You don't want too many in your story, but you want enough to make it interesting. What's the problem? Stories have problems which have to be resolved, and some stories have several problems which have to be resolved. What's the problem in your fantasy story? Remember, the structure's really important. You're going to have an opening which will set the scene and start to introduce the characters. And you're slowly building up to your problem, which then has to be solved, the resolution, and then ties all the ends together with your ending. And I put that on the bottom, remembering your basic SPAG, please. So showing us your sentence structure, how you can vary your sentences. You can use different fronted adverbials to start your sentences. We can use conjunctions to join ideas. So we're making it interesting. And if you think when we read Letters from the Lighthouse and how we unpicked the grammar in there. Okay, you might have some ideas of what you want to do for your story, and that's absolutely fine. But some people might be sat there a bit nervous and thinking, I don't know what to write about. Maybe you've not read a lot of fantasy stories and the whole idea is a bit daunting. So I'm going to show you a selection of images now which might help you. And then you can pause the video and you can go back and have a look at them. So there's this one here. So remember, it's a fictional world. Well, where could this place be? It looks like it's in a big cave somewhere. These people look like they've arrived. Do they live here? Have they arrived at a new world? Do they speak English in this new world? So if you want to, you can use this to help you. I quite like this idea too. The idea of a normal kind of character, this man here, but he's in a fictional world. What are these orbs of light? What are they? Is it somewhere he lives? Is it a place he looks after? Is there anybody else there? That tree looks a bit like the Harry Potter Whomping Willow tree, but maybe that tree's got a story. Or is that tree alive as a character? Maybe that grips you. You could use that one. What about this one? It looks quite a normal setting, a town, but we've got this troll who appears maybe is just lifted up from the ground, because you can see he's got trees on his back, and then he's causing havoc and all these people are running. Do you want to use this as your stimulus for your writing? And perhaps including some of those people running away. Who is he, and why has he got a boat under his arm, and where's he going? And why has he just decided to lift that roof off that house? So you might want to use one of those to help you as well. But again, anything is fine. If you want to, you might choose to use this planning frame to help structure your ideas before you start writing. And remember, this is the IPEAL writing frame we've used at school. This is available to download on the Year 6 part of our website. So here you use your opening. Remember, just short bullet pointed notes. You're not writing the whole opening in that box. And you're using that to explain the 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, why, and to set the scene. Then it says point 1, point 2 and point 3. You're using those to structure your next 3 paragraphs. So the next paragraph will be about your build-up to get to that problem. And remember, in that top box of point 1 is your main thing you want to say. And then the elaboration and detail is that detail to it. What extra information are you going to give? Then point 2, the problem. What is it the character's got to solve? If we go back to that man with the tree and all those light orbs, what was the problem he was trying to overcome? And then point 3, the resolution. How is it solved? And then the ending. How will you end your story? So you tie all those ends together to make the reader feel satisfied. Do you remember, like in the end of Letters from the Lighthouse, we knew that everything had happened, all that key problem about Suki going missing, she was found, and as a reader we feel satisfied. Remember, the bottom half of the plan is just as important, as it helps you think of your key vocabulary, the language, your conjunctions. Remember the fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. The hands and feet, the however, although, nevertheless, despite, since, furthermore, eventually, even though, though. And those openers, so you don't start your sentences all in the same way. You might use a range of fronted adverbials. During the morning, the man walked through the forest. Throughout the day, after a long time. Makes your writing more interesting. And that bottom bit, remember in school we started to plan out specifically which year 3, 4 words and which 5, 6 words we would use. So here I've got them for you, and I suggest you pause the video and maybe choose 4 from here which would lend themselves to your story. So let's say you're picking that story with the man in the forest with those light orbs. Which words jump out at you which you know you can include? You might have the word appear. You might have the word favourite. You might have the word peculiar. It's up to you, but what I would say is make sure you copy them correctly. And it's really useful when you include them in your writing if you underline them. And then the same with the year 5, 6 words. Choose 4 or 5 of those which would lend themselves to your type of story. Pause the video if you need to have a look. Okay, so remember that planning frame is, for those of you at home, is available on the website. You don't have to use that. You don't have to print it out. You can make notes elsewhere, but you might find it useful because that's what we use in school. And remember the purpose of today's lesson is to write us a fantasy story, to show us what you know now, and then when we come to look at Leon and the place between, we'll learn more things which you can put into your writing. And after you've finished your writing, I want you to bear these points in mind. Please read back through your story. Read it aloud so you can hear it. And I know that sounds a bit strange, but we're encouraged to do that as teachers, to read them aloud. You hear it better with an expression, and it makes you realise if you missed anything and does it sound right. Sometimes when your brain's working faster than your hands, you miss out words and therefore it doesn't make sense. Do you need to edit it, green pen edit it? Have you checked your punctuation and spelling? I know it sounds daft, but do your sentences start with a capital letter and finish with a full stop where they needed to? Have you used speech? Have you used inverted commas to show where that speech is being used? Have you checked back to your plan? And you know, we say at school it's quite useful if you tick off things as you do them in your plan to make sure you've included them. Can the reader visualise the setting? So if there's a story without pictures, how is the reader going to know they're in this fantasy world? And that will come with your choice of adjectives to describe those colours and maybe the smells and the feelings in this setting. Have you described what the characters are like, or have you inferred what they are like by how they move or what they say and how they treat others? Do you remember in Letters from the Lighthouse, with some of those characters, we often could tell what they were like Esther Jenkins, through her actions and reactions with others. And then finally, upload it to Dojo Portfolio. And remember, it doesn't have to be a polished piece. It's just to see where you're at now, and then we know what we can do over the next few weeks to help your fantasy stories become even better. Okay, good luck, and I look forward to seeing them soon. Bye-bye.